Hey everyone. So today I'd like to invite you to have another look at one of the maps from my neighbor or neighbors, whom I don't know, but who kindly left their collection of little maps in my public book box. This is a map of an Austrian region in the mountains. This is from Tyrol, which you might know since it's a very beautiful area and there's quite a lot of tourism, a lot of skiing. So who knows, maybe you've been there. What we're seeing here is a small part of Tyrol. We're in the Untitled, so the lower Inn Valley. The Inn, this is right here, comes from this bottom left corner and runs in sort of a northeastern direction. It becomes the border between Austria and Germany a little further north. There's also a small area that's actually called the Inn Quarter. I guess you would translate it the Innviertel. But that would be in another part of Austria. The largest city in Tyrol is called Innsbruck, which we would have further up the river. So it's not on this map anymore. And as you can imagine, since the Inn River Valley features the largest city of Tyrol, plus you can see here we have quite a large number of settlements in a decent size too. And if you look a little further down, this is all mountainous area. It's not really a surprise to imagine that the Inn Valley is also the region where most people in Tyrol live. In fact, it's about half the population of the entire Bundesland of all of Tyrol lives in the lower Inn Valley. So quite a lot of people. This is one of the older maps. I haven't been able to see when exactly this is from, but I'm guessing it's from the 70s. So these villages and cities here surely have grown since then. I'm sure you have the same phenomenon in your areas, that there's a tendency to move out of the city centers and to build along the outer areas. You'll often have sort of larger shopping centers on the outskirts. But in the Inn Valley you also have like more industry and more businesses here in this area. I'm guessing it's here in this area. I have to admit, I haven't been there. I think I just went through it by train at some point. But on the other hand, there's not that many places elsewhere where you could build your business. So it's in the Inn Valley. This map was intended to be used if you wanted to go hiking in the mountains. And so we have very, very detailed depictions, not just of the mountains, but also of different kinds of phenomena that you might find there. For one, obviously, we can see all of the waterways. We already said here's the inn. For example, here we have a small stream. In this case, we have a clam, Kundlerklamm, meaning usually quite a steep area where you would walk through right along the water. You would often have a little path that's built in there. Usually very beautiful, but a little dangerous if you're in there in the wrong weather. Further up it becomes the Wildschönauer Ache. We can see it runs all the way through the mountains here. And then to the other side of our map. And on the other side we have the Steiner Talbach. Again with quite a lot of different arms. Where are we? Right here. We have these little dots here. I am not quite sure what they stand for. Let's just have a brief look here at the legend. So this is quite fascinating. We have individual trees marked with this sign. So a little circle with a line. We have gardens. I'm guessing with the individual houses marked in them. In green we have forests. Different kinds of it. These are Larchen. They are above the tree lines. They would be, I guess almost more like bushes. I'm not quite sure what the English word for it is. But they're quite typical in the higher Alpine regions. And these actually then are bushes, or instead of trees, individual bushes. We have vineyards, and this would be hop for brewing beer. We have wet ground, very wet ground, and this would be Torfstich mit Torftrockenhütten. So a lot of detail, and again, so that these individual trees are quite common on the map, and I find it really fascinating that they went to these lengths to depict these. What we also see are these red lines all the way around. And the red lines that we have here stand for 20 meters of height. So from one to the other you would cover 20 meters. These dark red ones, I'm not quite sure what they are. The only red line I see is 100 meters. But I don't think that's what they are. I think they're rather maybe between districts. But I'm not seeing an explanation on the side. We can see that it's covered in a lot of forest here in this area. But of course, the higher up you get, you would not have trees anymore. You can see the individual houses marked here in the villages. It's really with a lot of detail. And you not only have the names of the summits, such as here, Gradelspitze, 1,898 meters. You also have the names of what we would call Alm. So basically, like here, Schindliebenalm, Hochlindalm. So these are areas where you would have your cattle in summer. So just alpine meadows without trees. One interesting part is here. This is going to take us to the other side of the map. We have another little river. This is the Ziller, which leads us into the Ziller Valley, das Zillertal. And here we have it. You can see that it looks quite prominent compared to the area around it. It's one of the 3 largest valleys leading up to the Inn Valley. Again, we have the river in the middle, and it's very noticeable here that the villages are not built directly next to the water, but further towards the edges of the valley, next to the mountains. Of course, as you can imagine, you have a lot of snow here in this area, and in spring when it melts, there's a danger that you have floods in the valleys. So it's safer to build your houses a little further away, a little further up, to protect them. One little detail that really fascinates me about the Zillertal. A long time ago, this was roughly where the border ended between 2 provinces of the Roman Empire, which was Noricum on this side and Rätien on this side, which you sometimes still find in some of the areas in the Alps. And it's also where the Austrian dialect roughly splits into 2 different parts. You have Central Bavarian here and Southern Bavarian here. So the Zillertal still is a bit of a dividing line, basically, but a very popular one. You have a lot of tourism here. It's quite famous for it. But I would like to look at this area not just on this map. I think it's a fascinating map, but there are other ways to see what this place really looks like. Let's give it a go. So here's one of them. We're not quite in the Inn Valley, but let's just orient ourselves for a moment. Okay, so we have Germany here, Austria here, and here's the Adriatic Sea. I would be somewhere up here in Vienna, and you can see here's Upper Austria, Salzburg, and this would be Tyrol. Here's Innsbruck, the main city in Tyrol. And then here you would have the Nordtiroler Kalkalpen, across the border Bayerische Alpen, Rosenheim and Munich. So the image that we want to have a look at is number 3. You can see it's down the Inn River, but it's not yet in Salzburg. So this is roughly what we were looking at here. We have Kufstein here on this map, which is in Tyrol. You can see this beautiful detail here of a castle up on a little mountain. I really love this. And we have the inn coming through here. And we have Berge in this part. So Berge we earlier saw on the large map here in the top right corner. The inn then takes a little bend past Kufstein and then becomes this border river between Austria and Germany. So we would have been roughly here in this area. I'm not quite sure if this would be the Zillertal or whether it would be one further up. But presumably it's right here and then Innsbruck further in this direction. And we can see the mountain ranges with the Hohe Salve, 1,828 meters. With the Hartkaiser, 1,555 meters. And here we're a little further up. Treffauer 2304, Fleischbank 2026, and going hard at 2242 meters. So we have a bit of a higher mountain range here, and then we move down into the Kaisertal. We also have a lake here, Walchsee, that I think we're going to see in a moment on another map. Because this is quite beautiful. I think it gives us a good idea of what we would look at if we were actually there. And how to orient ourselves in the mountains and in these valleys. It's of course sometimes difficult to really get the hang of it when you're down on the ground. You can't look across the mountains. You don't always see how far or near some of the places are. You just have to follow whichever way the valleys go to find your way. Alright, let's put this aside for a second. And have a look at another way of looking down on the ground from a little further up. This is really fascinating. So what we have here, we are north of the Alps and we're looking from Munich to Innsbruck, so Germany and Austria. It's quite noticeable that we have flat land here. You can see the pattern of the fields in Bavaria, and we can also very clearly see the center of Munich right here, with the Isar running through the river. We can even make out these green parks and gardens that we have in Munich. And that very dense city center. North would be in this direction. And a little further north we have this structure here in white. This would be the airport of Munich. It's quite impressive when you compare it to the size of the actual city. It's massive, really. And you'll notice from Munich to the mountains, it's not really far. Maybe you've seen a picture of Munich before with these mountain ranges in the background. This is called the North Chain or the Northern Range. In German, it would be the Untitled Chapter, the in-valley chain. And the Inntal, which we've just looked at, would be right here, with the main city of Tyrol, Innsbruck, right here. Then runs further east. And we can very clearly see these valleys off to the south. This one would be the Zillertal, which we've just mentioned. One further, this would be the Stubaital. Also an area with some really interesting dialects. Tyrol in general is fascinating when it comes to German. It's in fact the Austrian dialect that developed the farthest in terms of historical language development. There are some specifics around these southern German dialects. And sort of Tyrol really took it all away. And of course today, when you have a very rural area, very remote regions, these are often quite conservative in their language use. So you have really interesting dialects that you can observe. So really, really fascinating. Alright, so we have the Zillertal, Stubaital, Inntal. We have the Inntalkette or the North Chain. And you can really see beautifully how the snow forms on the summits. I don't know if these are actually glaciers here in this area, or whether glaciers would be found a bit further south. Over here. But of course the snow stays for quite a while. And we have a number of lakes. We have the Ammersee right here. The Starnbergsee just north. We have Kachelsee and Walchsee, which might be on the other map. Right here, this is Walchsee, so might be that one. And if we are following this line from the Ammersee, we can see that there's another quite large place here. And I think this is Garmisch-Partenkirchen, which might also be a name that you've heard before, maybe from skiing races or from tourism. Because you have quite popular summits right next to it. So I think this is a really fascinating way to look at this area. You can tell it's not far from Munich to Innsbruck. You can tell it's not really far between these two cities, from Munich to Innsbruck. But the terrain makes it rather difficult to travel. You'd have to find your way through the mountains into the different valleys. Alright. So these were 3 very different ways to look at the region. One here, a bit of a stylized way of depicting the Alps. One seen from above with a satellite. And one very, very detailed to help you find your way through if you want to go on a hiking trip. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you again next week. Until then.